Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Keshava, and this is Sai Ganesh, and it's our great joy and blessing to get to be with all of you today. So nice to see so many returning friends from our zip code and many other zip codes. It's nice to have all of you. So today, we have a topic of hope, and it's a wonderful message from Christ and from Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita. But as Swami Kriyananda writes so elegantly in the Festival of Light, hope requires the substance of despair to be truly meaningful. And so when I was actually reading this reading and trying to tune into it, my mind was perpetually drawn not to the portion where Christ says, "If ye abide in me, then ye shall bear great fruit," but to the first part where he says, "But if ye abide not in me, then ye shall wither, and men shall cast you into the fire." And I actually wanted to talk about that portion of the reading first, and then we'll get to the hopeful part. But like listening to any great piece of music or reading any great piece of literature, the apex, the glory of revelation must be earned first. And so let's begin together. I think it's a fascinating thing and one that we all ought to consider frequently on our spiritual path, the inevitability of death. Thomas à Kempis, the great Christian mystic and the author of the book, The Imitation of Christ, he suggested that daily we meditate on the realization that one day we will die, and that actually we ought to try to die daily in the love of Christ. But what does that mean? It's a wonderful thing to hear or to read, but what does that experience actually feel like? As it says also in this reading, it's not enough merely to read words, but these words must become written on the very pages of our hearts. But what does it mean to die daily in the love of Christ or in the love of God? Now, of course, on one hand, it means that we give ourselves so completely that we cease to exist. That's the ultimate expression of this, perhaps, one where a heart is so full of devotion that we cease to be separate from the beloved, but we merge into the object of our greatest devotion. But I think if we all pause and introspect for just a brief moment, we may discover that that experience has come, if we're very lucky, perhaps once, perhaps for a moment, and probably very few of us are living in an unbroken state of that endless thrill of the union of the beloved with the lover, of that devotional heart's aspiration to God. And so to make these words real, what we actually need to do is embrace reality, which is that every part of our heart, which yet clings to this world, will never bear fruit. And this is such an impossible thing to try and grasp with the mind alone. And to see evidence of this, all you have to do is look into the eyes of youth. And it's my great joy and blessing to get to be one of the teachers at the Living Wisdom High School. So I get to work with high school students all the time. And one of the wonderful things about working with teenagers is that youthful vigor, that youthful hope that tomorrow will be beautiful, that the world will be good, and that we can make a difference. And that's one of the most charming things about young people, isn't it? But then isn't it so also that there are some older people who look at that vigor of youth and call it naivete? And they say, just wait, when you get older, you'll see. Nothing's what you think it is, and everything's horrible. But in response to that, the youth doesn't say, oh, perhaps you have some wisdom to offer me. Maybe this world isn't my own. But the youth says, watch. I'll be the first one out of trillions who have walked this earth who will make this work. And so off we race with our great vitality. And how many of us have fallen prey to this? That off we race to a college, off we race to a great job. And then as those things begin to turn to sand in our hands, instead of reconciling the fact that maybe this material plane will never get us what we're looking for, we only increase the acceleration of our foot pedal on the hope that materialism will give us what we want. We think, if only I had 10% more money, then I'd be happy. If only I had a wife, then I'd be happy. If only I had a different wife. then I'd be happy. If only I drove that Ferrari, if only I was respected, if only I conquered all of Europe. And then once you've done that, well, perhaps the world would satisfy this bottomless chasm of my heart. But think, as Swami Kriyananda writes in his song, The Hill That Was Tara, he says, no glory can last, that even we, as we labor to achieve some bright end, must accept after glory the night will descend. No human accomplishment will ever fulfill us. No conquering hero has ever won eternity. No husband has ever won eternal love through a human heart. And so in our desperation to outrace that despair, we find ourselves always looking for something more. And this leads to an escalation of our exteriorization. And next thing you know, instead of just going out for coffee with your friends on Saturday, you're going skydiving on Saturdays because you need that extra rush. But then what ends up happening is we end up living in the future rather than ever in the present. That, as Swami Kriyananda wrote beautifully, he said, we begin to live for the moment rather than in the moment. And we're always projecting ourselves to a future when we will be happy, to a future when we will be fulfilled. But the irony is, the more you project your consciousness in this manner, the more you forget how to be now, which is in fact the only place that you'll ever experience your life anyway. To the point where you might be falling out of an airplane and be thinking about, oh wow, next time I'll do 13,000 feet. And you can't even experience what God has placed right in front of you to have. So what's the antidote to all of this? Well, for many of us, and as it says in the Bible, for many of us, we just run that path as long as we can. And then eventually one day, we look in the mirror and we realize that we've grown old. And that time, the inexorable one, even though we've never dared look behind us to see his form creeping up, he's always been there. And one day we look in the mirror and we see his face reflected in ours. And then suddenly that youthful vigor and zeal that we once had dies and withers. And we are sent into the fires to burn by the next generation of youth who say, you failed, I'll succeed. Move out of the way. And so then, embittered, saddened, disheartened, perhaps, we move into the final stages of our incarnation, and at last we lie on our deathbeds, we breathe our final sighs, and we wish that life would have given us what we wanted. Oh, fatal wish, for you'll get to do just that, and you'll get to come back and try again. And you'll come back and you'll be placed again in a new body, fresh and full of vigor and vitality, and you'll think, this time I will wrestle immortality out of the material. How many times must we be deceived by this before we begin to realize that this is a rigged game, that it will never work? But my invitation to all of us is actually to get out of the hamster wheel by stopping running forward and actually beginning to look back. Stop and look inwards. Death, the great fear of all men. Yogananda said that the strongest impulse in all mankind is the desire for self-preservation. It is so deep, so instinctive. But I invite all of us to meditate and to consider, one day this all shall pass. This body too will burn. All that I know of myself will be gone. And then with that in mind, live gratefully in this moment. And actually, I invite also for all of us to try and make a friend out of death. It's been my great pleasure in this life to be blessed by many mentors. I am rich when it comes to spiritual inheritance. And one of my mentors is Drupada MacDonald, who's one of the best astrologers that I've ever come across. And he's a man of wisdom. And he started mentoring me when I was just a teenager, when I was about 13 years old. And when he met me at 13 years old, he was trying to tell me all of what I'm telling you now. And I was a little young, I didn't quite understand it. And I still liked motorcycles and wanted to be a Hollywood actor and thought that, okay, great, good story, but I'll make it work. But he started telling me, he said, Keshava, you need to become friends with death. And he suggested that I begin meditating and considering the inevitability of death. Not just in the entirety of this body, but the fact that every moment is actually a death and a rebirth. Every inhalation is a resurrection. Every inhalation is a new opportunity for you to become a new person. And every exhalation is the cessation of what you were. In this way, it's very interesting, actually. Swami Kriyananda said that if you were to define a person or yourself, that you should never define yourself by what you've been, because that's already in the past, it's gone. But what you ought to do is define yourself by where you're going, by your aspiration, because that is the only true indication of your consciousness. But now I invite all of you to what would it look like in our lives if we tried to really realize that this moment is a special, unique gift from God, and it will never come again. I was so deeply touched when I was reading the letters of Sister Gyanamata, the foremost woman disciple of Yogananda, a great soul, a great saint. And upon her death, Yogananda gave a eulogy, which is such a touching piece of writing. And in that eulogy, he said, I grieve, or rather first he said, I celebrate, because Sister Gyanamata and I are one in God's eternal bliss, where we will laugh together for all eternity. But I grieve for Sister Gyanamata and Yogananda will never again walk this earth. Isn't that so touching? This is the wisdom of the Master, that all things are true simultaneously. Yes, the body is dead. That soul, which is now infinite, will never again inhabit that form. And yet, he is united with Gyanamata in eternity forever, where they will dance and sing the joy of God for eternity. But yet he can grieve that never again will these two forms walk together. And so what would it look like for us to remember that I and my wife, my beloved, will never walk this earth together again? I and my friend will never walk this world together again. And in that way, I invite you to gather together the bundle of sticks of your material experiences and cast them willingly into the fire of wisdom, into the fire of purification, to realize that all of this is impermanent, and to seek, therefore, the permanent essence underlying all of these experiences, which is none other but the presence of God. It's very interesting. In this life, joy will be inevitable, happiness inevitable, and we all yearn for that, don't we? But so too pain will be inevitable. Heartbreak will be inevitable. I was talking with a friend of mine just recently, and she said, well, along certain lines, basically, but God won't break my heart, will he? I said, God is going to shatter your heart into 1,000 tiny little pieces. But as Rumi, one of the great mystics, said, it is the cracks in the heart where God's light may enter. And so what if instead of running from death, what if we turn and befriend him? What if instead of bracing our heart for the inevitable impact of loss or grief, what if we open wide our hearts? Take what you will, for I desire no more anything that is impermanent. And as they chanted so beautifully, I want only thee. See, it's a beautiful thing to chant that chant. It's wonderful to dream of what it will feel like when we can truly say that, I want only thee. But you know, one of the fastest ways to really mean that is to suffer so badly that you can't endure another minute of this anguishing monotony, as Yogananda called it. But see, then, what we need to ask ourselves is what then is good karma and what is bad karma? Would you rather be ensnared in this wheel of samsara for another 100 million years of unblemished worldly happiness? Or would you rather suffer and be free and experience an ecstasy beyond imagination of expectancy, as Yogananda calls it? Yogananda said that we need to be heroes. We need to be courageous on the spiritual path. So let's be courageous. Let's embrace all the gifts that Divine Mother has to give to us, not just the gifts of prosperity and love and mercy and grace, but also those gifts of pain and destruction and death and desolation. Let's embrace them in her name. And remember this: God makes no mistakes. And whatever is coming to you is for your good. Now, that is not an easy prayer. And you may have many sleepless nights of tears ahead of you. But cling to that prayer. Cling to that prayer. Because eventually you'll get to that spot, all of us will, when our hearts will cry out with so much force, "Cast me not at death's door, Divine Mother. Cast me not at delusion's door. Take everything you want, but destroy my inner wisdom, not once again." Because Divine Mother is waiting to see how much do we really love her. We've spent so many incarnations playing in the mud of this material plane, calling out to Divine Mother, "I want this or that. I want this favor, that power, that strength, this lover, that conquest." And now we're beginning to whisper to her, "I want thee." But she needs to know, do we really mean it? And so she'll send those tests and she'll send those fires. But the thing is, remember that you are not your ego. You are not this little bundle of self-definitions. And so when the fires of Divine Mother's purifying love come, embrace them. Let them burn. Let them burn away your limitations, the dross of your ignorance, and stand before her naked, vulnerable, and pure, at least in your sincerity, begging her to take you on her lap at last. That's what this reading is, to me, calling us to do. And then, but how do we begin to actually do that? How do we begin to take and transmute the earthly and human suffering and uplift our awareness to the point that we can actually see it as the living hand of Divine Mother? Because again, without spiritual magnetism, all these are but words and they'll mean nothing to you. But Christ gives us the secret mystic key, which is attunement, which is contact with the God-realized Master. That it is through receiving the grace of one of the avatars that we can raise the energy in our spines to the point where we can perceive life as it truly is, which is to say we can perceive our own experiences as they truly are. Once I had a very challenging personal karma, a test, and I could feel my heart contracting and my energy falling. I could feel the responses of bitterness, sorrow, anger, rage, all rising within me. But I was very lucky. Divine Mother put the thought in my mind, and she told me, "Remember, Keshava, your response to this experience is based on the level of your own consciousness. Do not be deceived. Your reaction to this is not empirically true." And I thought, okay, Divine Mother, well, that's very helpful, but what do I do about that? And I realized I needed to increase the proximity of my heart with my guru. And being at the time a young and vigorous man, I practiced the energization exercises. It was as simple as that. And I resolved myself that I would practice the energization exercises as many times as it took until Divine Mother came and changed my heart and helped to show me what her true intention was through this curse. I said, "I tell you what, Divine Mother, I'm going to stand here and do it as long as it takes until you can prove to me that this is a blessing." I energized once. I was very grumpy. I energized twice. I was still very grumpy, but with more energy, so I was energetically grumpy. I energized a third time. I was beginning to realize that maybe being grumpy was my choice, but I was still very happy for it to be my choice. I energized a fourth time. And I began realizing that grumpiness actually isn't all that much fun. And besides which, it's kind of getting in the way of this whole flow of energy that I'm trying to get into my body. I energized a fifth time and I realized, Divine Mother, you are testing me, and I accept. As Yogananda wrote in one of his prayer demands, I will wear my scars. I will wear my tribulations not as scars, but as medals given for courage. And I said, okay, Divine Mother, you seem to have a whole lot of faith in me, but you would never give me something that is bad for me, so I accept. And I strode into the next chapter of my life, and I got hammered. I got brutalized. But she saw me through. She has seen me through. And so let's remember, friends, because when we sit and we have a beautiful meditation, when we come here, we have a wonderful Sunday service full of lively and devotional chanting and these wonderful readings, it's much easier in the confines of these four walls to remember that, yes, God alone is all I'll ever need. And then somewhere between the bagel bar and our car, the magic happens, and we're back. Then we have those moments, those check-in points of morning and night where we have our communion with God and we remember perhaps even just a little bit of who and what we truly are. But we need to bridge those gaps. We need to bridge the gap between Sunday service and our meditation. We need to make every moment a sadhana. And we can make every moment a sadhana by embracing infinity. But again, that seems like an impossible feat. So I invite you to embrace finitude. Embrace this moment and embrace the fact that every moment is a death. Every moment is being taken away from you. And therefore, every moment is an opportunity to surrender yourself into God and to find yourself in the flow of her divine grace. Play the game with Divine Mother. Try and do this every day. Let her winds push you through life and see what happens. And eventually, in the little ways, we'll actually begin to feel in our hearts that the events that happen to us throughout daily life are not cruel, wicked circumstance, but are the intelligent, loving hand of our Divine Mother helping to bring us home. And it's when we first will begin to feel her smile and her hand in those moments of blessings, when, metaphorically, the universe showers rose petals on our heads. It's easy to feel, but it's much harder when trials come. When I was in India last summer, I was taken on pilgrimage delightfully. My whole trip in India was a wonderful example of learning how to surrender, because I'm such an ignoramus when it comes to traveling, especially in India. I would have been hopeless. I probably would have been lost in the slums of Mumbai on day one. But luckily, when I went to India, basically, I was the package, and I was delivered to our different friends in different colonies, and they took care of me, and they just made sure that I was delivered to the next destination every time. And I was very grateful that one of my friends in India helped me go on some pilgrimage sites, took me to pilgrimage sites. And one of the places she took me was to Babaji's cave. And I would have been completely hopeless to get there by myself, logistically, literally. Even the willpower, I probably wouldn't have even bothered, but she said, we're going to Babaji's cave. I said, great. So we're in the van. It's like a 9-hour drive through India, which basically, for those of you who haven't been, think like a death-defying roller coaster. And the whole time, every time we get in a vehicle, I go for the seatbelt, and my friends start reprimanding me. Keshava, you don't have to wear a seatbelt. I'm like, but it seems very prudent. And they said, no, you don't have to. Okay. I mean, it seemed like it was almost offensive for me to wear a seatbelt in India, so I wasn't. And then, we'd go careening around the corners, and I'd be like, God, I love you, I love you, I love you. God, faith is my armor, but it seems like a seatbelt wouldn't be a bad idea. But at any rate, we got up to Babaji's cave, and it was a beautiful hike of about, a mile or something? Something like that. To actually get to Babaji's cave, there I meditated and prayed, and then we came back, and I was walking with a very distinct sense of God's grace. I really felt that Babaji and the great ones and Divine Mother were just throwing rose petals before my feet. Even as I was walking, my companions said a few phrases that were extremely meaningful to me without them even knowing. It was just, I felt the whole universe was conspiring to tell me that God loved me and that I was beloved to him. And I was so expansive and just, my heart felt it was about to burst for love. And we got back in our car, and we were careening back down the mountain at record-setting pace. I mean, it was like Travis Pastrana rally car racing. And we're coming around one of the corners, and I kid you not, I'm sitting in the seat, and I think to myself, oh, Babaji, thank you so much for showering rose petals before my path. Bam! I didn't even see it coming because I had my eyes closed. It could not have been more perfect. I said before my path, and we went into a head-on collision. And it luckily wasn't completely head-on. It was a little bit at the side, and my window was open, and all of a sudden, shards of broken glass and plastic are flying across my face. Those were the rose petals. Divine Mother said, I got your prayer. Here they come. It was quite an experience. As it happens, I made friends with the local police chief, got to have tea with him. It was very interesting, but I won't go into the whole rest of the story. But what was very interesting for me was we got into the accident, I saw the glass fly, it's all over my shirt, and there's that temptation, instantly, to be upset with God. How dare you, God? We were having such a nice date together and you ruined it. But I had to catch that thought with the affirmation of my own faith, to say, okay, God, if this is what you've brought to me, I accept it with an open heart and with both my hands. And again, it was very interesting. We just went through the whole thing. And as it happened, so this is just like the wonders of India, a story. I had a reading with the sage Agastya. And for those of you who don't know, Agastya is a sage who lived a long time ago. I'm a little unclear on the details, and maybe the world is unclear on the details, but somewhere circa 600 to 1,000 years ago, something like that, or maybe more. Doesn't matter, a long time. But he was a great saint and an astrologer, and he would write out on a leaf astrological readings for people who had yet to be born. And then you identify yourself on the leaf by your thumbprint. Now, as many of you I'm sure know, every individual's thumbprint is in fact unique. And so I gave my thumbprint, and they found my leaf. And they said, is your name Keshava Betts? Were you born on May 26, 1994? Do you have 3 brothers? Is your mother's name Sitabai or Suzanne? And I'm going, oh my God, this is unbelievable. But one of the things in there is the man, the Agastya, the saint, said, you have some accident-prone karma, and you may get into automotive accidents. I know, right? So careful if you take me on a road trip. Hang on, though. It's not over yet. The story's not over, David. Hold on. But we got into this accident, and my friends were sitting there, and they said, one of my friends, who's very intuitive, she said, I was just praying to Babaji, and I really feel that this accident was him lifting one of our karma. Someone has a karma in this vehicle, and he was helping to remove it from them. Maybe someone has some karma of getting hit in cars or accident karma, and he was just pulling it away. I really feel that this was his grace helping to mitigate something. I'm sitting there like, should I tell them that it's me? Now, I don't know. Of course, we'll have to find out. If the next Sunday service I come up on crutches, then we can have another laugh together. But for the time being, here I am. And I know that I live protected by God's infinite light. As Swami says, so long as I can remain in the heart of it. So my friends, let's try always to remain in the heart of that infinite light. Let's gather together all the various sticks of our worldly experiences, all those things which are wrought not with his vibration, but by our own. And let's cast them willingly and joyfully into the fires of freedom, until at last it's only God's vibration that moves through us. And as Christ says, then you can ask of the heavens anything, and it shall be done unto you. God bless you, my friends. Oh, you.
see.